as an anthropologist, one of the things that's really shocked me is how history is dealt with the wisdom keepers, with the women wisdom keepers. How they have been dismissed. They have been written out of the historical record, and and even the archaeological record reveals some amazing, uncanny relationships with the feminine, because until 35,000 years ago, in Central Europe, you find that the divine is represented by the Madonnas, by the Paleolithic goddesses. You know, these wonderful goddess figures. 35,000 year period, you dig a shovel into the earth at the right strata, and you find a goddess. And then 6,000 years ago, they disappear, and they're replaced by the phallus. The phallus now becomes a representation of the divine, the tree of life. The openings in the earth are no longer those elements. And the feminine gets displaced completely. And if you look at the history of Europe for that 35,000 year period, there was no history of large-scale warfare in Europe. I mean, there were village skirmishes, but during the last 6,000 years, when the feminine is displaced and the masculine is established, the history of Europe is the history of war. It's the history of conquest, of domination, of territorial imperatives, of capitalism, materialism, of World War I, World War II, the War of the Roses, the 100 Years' War. And that mythology has exhausted itself today. There's a mythology that says that God gave all of the fishes and all of the trees and all of the birds for us to have as our food, that they all belong to us. And that resulted in such a predatory attitude toward the earth and the land and the mother and the Pachamama. And that mythology is ending. You know, we're coming to the end of that period in history, and a resurgence of the earth mythologies and the ways of the earth peoples. And that's the reason that we invited you to come and join us, so we could find a voice and give the voice of the earth ways, of ways that many people assume have been forgotten, or that they're going to discover in their new branding and advertising of a new product that's eco-friendly. When that is just, you know, paying lip service to the ways of the earth, the deeper, vital life and death and life and rebirth and renewal of the feminine that everybody's avoiding. So one of the shocking things that, as I look at our mythology, is that we have the only mythology in the planet in which we were kicked out of the garden. Nobody else in the earth was kicked out of the garden. The indigenous Americans were given the gardens to be the caretakers of, the stewards of the Aboriginals, the Sub-Saharan Africans. But the Westerners were kicked out of the garden, and then they were told by this voice that said, "And cursed is the earth because of you, woman." And then to the man the voice says, "And with the sweat of your back you will take your food from the earth, and it shall grow thorns and thistles for us." So right in page 2 of our mythology, we completely alienate the feminine, because the earth is cursed. The Mother Earth, she grows papayas and mangoes and strawberries for us, not thorns and thistles. And to the woman, cursed is the earth because of you, woman. And so that mythology of banishment is coming to an end. We're back in the garden. We're taking the garden over again. You know, it's been badly run for the last 6,000 years. And the feminine is now returning, the mothers, the daughters, the grandmothers, and for men, for us men, the reawakening and the honoring of that feminine self that is in stewardship and not in dominion over. And this is such an urgent and compelling crisis that you, as the grandmothers, all of us as as the keepers of the earth traditions, we have to let our voice be heard. It's a voice that hasn't been heard since the Inquisition tried to squash it out. Remember that in 1564, the Council of Trent, the elders of the church in Rome gathered to determine whether animals, Indians, or women of color, and women had souls. And they determined that animals and Indians did not have souls. It took them 23 days to decide that women indeed have souls. So we've inherited an earth that is devoid of soul, that is inanimate, that is devoid of spirit. And we want to offer our children's children the possibility perhaps to live in an earth that is inspirited, soulful, alive again, and to bring healing before healing becomes cataclysmic. Because we are like a parasite that's killing its host, and we're committing a kind of matricide on our mother, on the earth. And now's the time for these ancient voices, I believe, to come forth. And you're the finest voices that I know.
Well, I remember a time in many of the North American tribes when there was really the deep understanding of the primacy of the feminine. In the Lakota way, the word wakan means, I don't know if it exactly means it, but it expresses the first cause, it's the womb of creation, the womb of all things. Sometimes I think of it as this starry realm with all the stars available. So wakan is first, it's the ground of being. And then skan, lightning, strikes in, touches one of those stars, and then brings something into manifestation. But wakan, the feminine, has always been recognized as primary, and the ability of the female to bring through that life into the world was primary. And so there's been a forgetting of that. I call it cowboy Indian macho. You know, it's really the forgetting of those truths about the feminine. And among some tribes, the grandmothers, the wisdom women, were the ones who could even depose a chief. Let's say the chief, certainly he has that ability to carry and move the people, and in our northern plains, he had to move you to where the grass was and where the buffalo were or whatever. But if he was warring, if he was leading into war, then that war caused people to come back and war on us, and we were killed, and our children were killed, and our young men. So if that was the kind of masculine energy that was being carried, the women deposed that chief, and they said, we need a chief who is a balanced person. He carries the masculine, yes, he can take us here and there and carry us, move us, be active. But he has to do that based in the principle of the feminine, which is the nurturing and renewing of the people. If he's not acting from that feminine base of nurturing and renewing the people, then his actions are not workable, and he is deposed. We invite someone to lead us then who will honor that feminine nurturing and renewing of all life. Very powerful.